housings during the shutdown. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission said that they found flaws in 17 of them, but no leaks. In addition to the 2 resident inspectors, the NRC has had specialists observing the refueling outage. One of them is focusing on the flaws they found and will evaluate how the company has handled them.
Coming up, scary video.
They're coming apart at the seams. And plutonium, cesium, iodine is accumulating for 24,000 years. It doesn't matter, these levels are not harmful to the human. Oh, really? As they build up, as Richard Miller did his study in 1986 under the cloud, all radiation leaks are dangerous to the human because they build up and they build up. It is a house of cards coming apart. It is coming apart right in front of our face, and it's accumulating. These accidents, we had the problem up in Vermont. I mean, the whole wall falls down. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? We had the Cahoon problem in Nebraska. We had the problem with the fires raging through Los Alamos as those cans are just laying there naked. This thing is coming apart because we are broke. Nobody wants to set up and pay for this, and sure isn't the nuclear industry just suck money and suck down money, and they go to Vienna and sit and eat caviar and drink with each other and tell each other how important and how freaking great they are. When they don't have a plan, they don't have a clue. As Fukushima rains down, they don't have a clue. They don't care. They just suck up the money as the federal government props up and pays to build these things. The states fund them all, and they just suck up the profits. It's the biggest scam in the world. Kevin Blanche, stay tuned.
Fukushima, an ongoing warning to the world, by Amy Goodman with Dennis Moynihan. She is in Tokyo. I write these facts as dispassionately as I can, in the hope that they will act as a warning to the world, wrote the journalist Wilfred Burchett from Hiroshima. His story, headlined "The Atomic Plague," Plague, appeared in the London Daily Express on September 5, 1945. Burchett violated the U.S. military blockade of Hiroshima and was the first Western journalist to visit that devastated city. He wrote, quote, "Hiroshima does not look like a bombed city. It looks as if a monster steamroller had passed over it and squashed it out of existence." End quote. Jump ahead 66 years to March 11, 2011, and 600 miles north to Fukushima and the Great East Japan, the East Japan earthquake, which caused the tsunami.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from despite mass protests. We'll get the latest. Then we'll talk to a founder of Peace Boat, one of Japan's most prominent anti-war groups.
Who will make a peace? That is us. So, and the Peace Boat is to making the network of the peoples and the people, NGO and NGO, and the peace movement, global level, and start to promote the peace and the sustainable society.
More plants, nuclear power plants. Yet clearly the Japanese population is increasingly opposed to nuclear power, with Fukushima and the meltdowns at the plant. Talk about what Peace Boat did during the aftermath of Fukushima and your feelings about nuclear power.
Yeah, we organized the big scale. Maybe that is a system of the Japanese shrine system. As a god, they are there. And
how did Prime Minister Abe explain this visit, one that recent prime ministers have not made?
Yeah, that is what most the tricky point. He's saying that just he would like to play for the victim of the Japanese soldier, but they are not these 70s especially. They are not a victim. They forced to the Japanese soldier to go there in China and many Asian countries and kill other people, and that Japanese soldier also die. So I think this is a very important point. Is a Yasukuni Shrine is including the war leader of the war, the aggression, and also victim of the Japanese soldiers.
Can you talk about Article 9 of the Constitution, the one that says that Japan should not have an army? The U.S. Ensured that that was in the Japanese Constitution after World War II. Yet now the U.S. Is pushing for it to be removed, as is the government, the current government. Explain the significance of Article 9 and what Peace Boat is pushing for.
Okay, I think that as a Peace Boat, we organize a global conference for the Article 9. The reason why is that this peace constitution is a very important peace and stability.
Call it the peace constitution.
Yeah, we are calling it peace constitution, but especially Article 9 is in that peace constitution is the most important part to renounce the war and also military. And this is a very historical irony. And in the beginning, the United States, as a ruler of the Japan, they completely forced the Japan is demilitarized. But after that, Cold War started. So the U.S. government, they start to force us to have the military, even that
so
peace constitution.
The very government that demanded Article 9, no army, then is pushing for Article 9.
Exactly, especially that's the Korean War. At that time is a turning point. And after that, continuously, the U.S. government is pushing Japan to more and more militarize. And as one of the military of the U.S. Military.
Will Article 9 be removed?
Yeah, so Article 9 that is one of the very annoy the existence for the U.S. Policy, I think, even now. And that's why this is a very strong, struggle for the Japanese organization, the peace organization, to try to protect this one, to really keep the peace and stability in this region. But I would like to add one thing, that is Article 9 is not only that. I think this is a kind of very strong peace message from the experience of the terrible war. And more than 200,000 people died in the Asian Pacific through the war. So, and I think that the soul of these peoples is becoming the Article 9.
Tatsuya, finally, talk about nuclear power.
Yeah.
And just this week, as we're here, the government has announced they're going to push for more plants, nuclear power plants. Yet clearly the Japanese population is increasingly opposed to nuclear power, with Fukushima and the meltdowns at the plant.
Yeah.
Talk about what Peace Boat did during the aftermath of Fukushima and your feelings about nuclear power.
Yeah, we organized the big scale of the nuclear power free global conference the year 2012. And but the reason why is I think that Japan experienced Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as you know, and now we have the Fukushima. So if the Japan start again to promote the nuclear power plants, this is a terrible message to the world. Something like even the who suffered so much, that we still insist about the nuclear power plants. I think that is completely, we make some kind of the wrong message to the world. So, and I really insist that is a nuclear weapon experience, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and we have the Fukushima experience, and still victim is suffering continuously, and we are leaking the contaminated water to the Pacific Ocean. So what we have to do is, I think, very clear. And also, I would like to add, this is quite relate with the right-wing Japanese people would like to nuclear weapon armed, because the nuclear power plants, they continuously produce the plutonium, and this is a material for the nuclear weapon. I think that already some right-wing politicians start to discuss openly about the necessity of the nuclear arm for Japanese. I really cannot accept that as a country who experienced Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
It's quite remarkable when you look at recent Japanese history, the bookending. The only country to have 2 atomic bombs dropped on it by the United States, and then now, close to 70 years later, you have Japan, what, 30% of the electricity of the energy comes from nuclear power, with a push to 50% by 2030. But then Fukushima happens.
Exactly.
So how are people organizing?
I think that I really hope still Japanese people more than half that willing to the nuclear power, the society, but that unfortunately the government is completely taking the other direction. So, and I think that's the only way is we really have to promote with the peoples the nuclear power plant society.
Well, Tatsuya Yoshioka, I want to thank you for being with us.
No,
We are talking about moving in on the third anniversary of the Fukushima disaster. 19,000 people died or went missing on that day, March 11th, 2011, and the days afterwards when the earthquake triggered a tsunami and 3 of the reactors at the Fukushima nuclear power plant melted down. We're joined right now by Futaba's former mayor, Katsutaka Edogawa. For years, he embraced nuclear power. Now he has become a vocal critic. He's featured in the film Nuclear Nation. We welcome you to Democracy Now! And thank you for traveling 2 hours to join us here at the studios of NHK International for this conversation. Mayor, explain what happened on that day. Special thanks to Mary Joyce, who's translating for you today. On that day, March 11, 2011, and the days afterwards, when you decided it was time for the thousands of people who lived in your town, Futaba, to leave.
そしてその後の翌日についてお話します。
日は当日は突然大きな地震が鳴りました。その時今まで経験のない地震だったんで。
So on that day there was an earthquake of the scale of something we'd never experienced before.
大変驚きました。
It was a huge surprise.
原発に事故がなければいいなと祈ってました。
And at the time I was just hoping that nothing had happened to the nuclear power plant.
しかしやっぱり事故が起きてしまいました。
However, unfortunately, there was in fact an accident there.
そこで私は多くの町民を
And then I worked with the many residents.
放射能からの完全避難を考えました。
And thinking about how I could fully evacuate them from the radiation.
You made a decision to evacuate your town before the Japanese government told the people in the area to do this, but not before the U.S. government told Americans to leave the area, and other governments said the same.
日本政府は後でした。私の失敗は日本政府の避難指示を待ったことです。
Yes, the Japanese government's information to evacuate became much later than that, and my mistake at the time was initially waiting to hear that.
About Fukushima. One person who has diligently pursued the facts is Christina Consolo. She's the host of Nuked Radio. Her website is fukushimafacts.com, and she is on the phone with me right now. Christina, welcome to True News.
Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Well, Christina, first, before we get into a discussion of what is going on in Japan, what's your first reaction to this Alaska Airlines story?
Well, a lot of us were expecting to see some type of issue with people that fly for a living, because the radiation levels up in the jet stream right now are extremely high, and they have been for the last 14 months. In fact, some researchers and friends of mine I've loaned my Geiger counter to have flown with the Geiger counters on in the air, and the numbers are much higher than the gamma radiation that you would expect to have from cosmic sources. Flight attendants already have high propensity for developing breast cancer because they're exposed to gamma radiation from the sun and cosmic sources. But the manufacturers of the Geiger counters estimate that you should be getting about 200 counts per minute at about 18,000 feet of elevation, and the numbers that they're finding when they fly with their Geigers are about 10 times higher than that.
10 times higher.
Yeah, in fact, there was a flight, a gentleman, his name is Enviro Reporter. He's from YouTube, and he's been actually going on some news programs in California to talk about this. He flew from Santa Monica to Michigan in December, and recorded 60 times over what it should have been in the air. So, people that are being continually exposed to these levels of radiation, you're going to expect to see some type of sickness eventually, and it appears that that's what's happening.
And although we can't say this with conclusive proof because we don't know the facts behind what's going on with these Alaska airline flight attendants, but it does seem odd to me that if the new uniforms were issued in 2011, why are they breaking out in lesions and skin and hair loss now, a year later? That doesn't make sense.
Right.
So it to me, there is another source of the problem, and my first guess would be that they are being exposed to high levels of nuclear radiation, high in the altitude of the airspace flying over the Pacific. And obviously Alaska Airlines is doing a lot of Pacific coastal flights across the western United States. So I think we're going to see more stories like this. One thing is, Christina, is very obvious. The Japanese government, I believe, has lied from day one. I believe they're continuing to lie. And I believe the U.S. government is not necessarily lying. They simply aren't speaking. They're not talking at all about what is happening in Fukushima. So they're not going on the record saying anything, but the Japanese government is lying. They have not told the people the truth. And they've been caught over and over and over lying to the Japanese people.
Right. Well, yeah, and eventually, you can't stop the truth from leaking out of Fukushima. And Obama actually came out with a statement at the start of this disaster and said that their nuclear experts did not feel that harmful levels of radiation would reach our shores. And what we found from Freedom of Information Act requests that are posted on a website called Informable. The gentleman who has been requesting all of the transmissions between the U.S. government, the Chinese, the Russians, and the Japanese from the beginning of the disaster till now, and that includes NRC transcripts of phone calls. They were well aware of how high the levels were and that they were coming over here. In fact, infants in California were exposed to 40,000 becquerels of iodine-131 that causes thyroid cancer from March 17th till the beginning of April. And there was an actual letter that came from the FDA telling physicians in California not to put people on potassium iodide. And the only thing that I can draw from that is they didn't want to panic people. They didn't want them to know how bad the situation is. But the problem is that the situation is ongoing. Those reactors are steaming constantly. The corium, the melt nuclear fuel from the reactor pressure vessels is in the ground under the plants. They're dumping 9 tons of water on each reactor and spent fuel pool all day long. And that water is going into the ocean. Our storms are generated out of this huge radiation slick that's off the coast of Japan. And this all gets rained out over the west coast of Canada and the United States. And this has been going on for 14 months. And I have an inbox just full of people whose pets are losing hair, whose children are sick. They have lingering illnesses. The doctors are trying everything that they usually do to try to, they're diagnosing them with allergies and they're diagnosing them with bronchitis and they're treating them endlessly, with inhalers and all the things that they would usually put people on for these types of problems, and they're not getting better. And people are really getting desperate for answers. And this is a problem across the entire United States, but most of all in the Pacific Northwest. They've been getting hit the hardest since this began.
So from Alaska down along the Vancouver, Canada region into Seattle, Portland, is that the main zone that's getting the worst?
Yeah, but it's all the way down to Southern California. In fact, they detected cesium-137 and 134 in the pollen that was being released a few weeks ago in Southern California.
In the pollen.
These trees have, they uptake cesium through the water supply. It goes into the trees, and now it's being re-released in pollen from the trees in Southern California. And they had predicted this would only happen in Japan, but it's actually happening here.
Christina, what about milk? Do we have any reports of elevated levels of radiation in milk?
Yes. The EPA was testing milk at the beginning of the disaster. The EPA did testing for about 2 weeks and then said the levels were dropping, and they shut off all their tests. They stopped testing food. They stopped testing rainwater, soil, and they haven't resumed that testing. But independent labs have been. In fact, UC Berkeley reported in November that the levels of cesium in cow's milk are actually 150% higher than they were in April of last year. So what I've been telling all my friends with little kids is don't drink cow's milk anymore. Don't let your kids drink it. Use milk alternatives like almond milk, coconut milk. Coconut milk is also very high in potassium, so that's good for you because it helps block iodine uptake into your thyroid. Soy milk.
It's really interesting, Christina. I've told my audience this before. Before Fukushima, just maybe weeks or months before Fukushima, I had this sudden disconnect from milk. And I just had this feeling come over me, don't drink milk anymore, drink coconut milk. And I made the switch. And I don't even know where the thought came from because it's not something I've ever thought about. But I just suddenly, a year ago before Fukushima, I stopped drinking milk.
Yeah. Yeah, the milk supplies from Wisconsin are probably better than the ones from California because California's had such a high amount of fallout. In fact, the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, did soil samples back in April of last year and released those findings recently, showed the highest contamination in the country was in the cities of Los Angeles, Portland, and Boulder, Colorado. Although all 24 cities that they tested showed fallout from Fukushima. And we have some independent researchers who have just started testing beef from last summer, and California was reporting that fallout was being detected in cow manure. Well, if it's in the cow manure, it's in the milk, and it's in the beef already. The numbers don't go down. They get stronger as time goes on because radiation is cumulative. Unless you have the cows start ingesting something that will help negate those particles, like boron, and Hawaii's been feeding boron to their cows since April. In fact, the jet stream doesn't even usually dip as far as Hawaii. If anything, we should have been feeding boron to the cows over here. And what that does is help, in a way, absorb some of that material and have it pass out of the cow so that it doesn't go into the milk and into the meat. But we're not taking any of these measures. Farmers aren't even aware that this is going on. I mean, they're starting to become aware because there's so many people that are starting to really speak out about this.
Christina, do you think the situation will get to the point that the U.S. government will be forced to address the issue, or will they just continue to pretend nothing is happening?
Well, I have friends that work in the nuke industry as well, friends that I grew up with. And people have different opinions about why the government isn't talking about this. If you look at it from a global economic perspective, if people were aware of how bad the situation is, the economy in Japan is already really hurting. They were having, the same kind of problems that we're having here with the, mortgage crisis and so forth. But this is going to, economically devastate Japan as it is. It's going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars to manage the situation at Fukushima, because this is going to go on for possibly centuries. This problem is going to have to be dealt with over there. In fact, the Japanese government is taking over the Tokyo Electric Company's Fukushima plant because the company that owns it, the utility that owns it, has no money. They're broke. if you look at it from the global perspective, that could be a reason. If, what my friends in the nuke industry are saying is that the levels of contamination over here are so high that the entire United States needs to be decontaminated at this point. And it will bankrupt every state and local government.
Christina, you have sources in the nuclear industry in the United States who are privately telling you that America is already so contaminated that the nation needs to be. You're saying that they're telling you that the radiation levels are so high that this country needs to be decontaminated. Did I hear you right?
That's what they have been telling me since December. However, since then, the USGS posted those soil samples that they took back in April of last year, and they already showed high level of contamination, especially in LA, Portland, and Boulder. And that was from April of last year. Now, this has been ongoing. We've had, since then, 14 more months of rain and weather and wind blowing that stuff over here. It's settling on the ground, settling on the trees, and it's starting to show up in plants all over the country, especially dandelions. Plants that grow fast and uptake a lot of water are starting to show some very strange mutations. In fact, we started a page on Fukushima Facts and on Facebook called Mutation Watch, where people can go and post images of weird stuff that they're finding in their area. And what I'm doing is I'm relabeling all those images with the person's name, the date the image was taken, and the location, and we're sending them to researchers so they can put them in their studies that they're doing, their lectures that they're doing, so we can get this information out to the public.